Okay, so here's some news kind of from our space here. The Workers' Party of Britain tweets out yesterday, 11:30 a.m., urgent statement. At 11 a.m., we were informed by police officers in Gatwick that our party leader, George Galloway, and his wife have been detained at the airport. The police agreed that they would pass a message to our comrades from us and pass back a reply from them. Despite repeated attempts to gather further information and despite repeated calls to the police, we have no further information on their well-being, nor on the observation of their rights. No information on charges or alleged offenses. Therefore, we may conclude this is politically motivated intimidation. We call on all supporters and friends to amplify this message and demand the immediate release of our leaders. Now, they were, of course, released that day. They were held for about 4 to 5 hours. And the BBC reported George Galloway stopped by counter-terror police at Gatwick. Former MP George Galloway and his wife were stopped by counter-terrorism police at Gatwick Airport. The Workers' Party of Britain said its leader and Putri Gayardhi Pertiwi, the party's deputy chair, that's his wife, were detained on Saturday morning. They had reportedly returned to the UK from Moscow via Abu Dhabi. The Metropolitan Police said a man in his 70s and a woman in her 40s were stopped by counterterrorism officers under the Counterterrorism and Border Security Act, but neither were arrested and they were allowed on their way. In a statement, Galloway's party condemned what it described as politically motivated intimidation, which I just read you, and said freedom of speech is lying on the scrap heap. Police said the stops were made under Schedule 3 to the Counterterrorism and Border Security Act 2019. This allows an officer to stop, question, search, and detain a person at a port or the border area in the UK to determine if they have engaged in hostile activity. Those being detained can be required to provide information, including passwords to devices. It is not known whether this was requested in this instance. The Workers' Party of Britain said it was informed Galloway and his wife had been detained at Gatwick by police on Saturday morning. In a later statement on X, it said Galloway, 71, and his 40-year-old wife had been released without charge. So the Workers' Party put out a statement on the release. Our party condemns the attempt to intimidate those who seek amity rather than enmity with the rest of the world. Our leader, George Galloway, and Deputy Chair, Gayatri Galloway, have now been released without charge. There was never any chance of an offense. We were obstructed from providing legal support, and the conduct of the affair had been designed to intimidate political opponents of the drive towards war with Russia and China. A fuller account will be given tomorrow night. That was, of course, this afternoon. So be sure to watch and follow Mother of All Talk Shows TV for the full account. We're going to play you a piece of that in just a moment, but I want to show you a couple takes here. Craig Murray says the detention of George Galloway under the Terrorism Act and seizure of his devices, exactly the same that Richard Medhurst and I each suffered, shows what a crazy authoritarian state the UK now is. No remote connection to terrorism. Of course not. It's absurd. And this photo kind of captures the irony. Upon arriving at Gatwick Airport, UK police detained George Galloway under the Terrorism Act. What's that guy's name? What's his name?
Alawi, right?
Yeah, but what about the British guy's name?
That's Lammy.
Lammy. That's what I always forget. Yeah, Lammy. Lammy and Alawi. Yeah. Yep. So you can back Al-Qaeda in Syria, but now
separated at birth.
Yeah. Now you're going to detain George Galloway. So, of course, George Galloway gave about a 20-minute monologue recapping what happened here. I'm going to play about a 4-minute excerpt. This is pretty fiery, as you would expect from George Galloway. A very difficult man to intimidate. So here he is giving his response to what happened.
Was spoken by an armed policeman, his jacket off so you can gaze at his sidearm, that you are not under arrest, but you are not free to leave. To hear the words spoken, you do not have the right to remain silent. To hear the words spoken, that if you do not comply and cooperate and answer any and all of my questions, you will be automatically committing an offense under the Act. That's when I really knew that liberty in England, in Britain, in this once proud democratic country, a country that for many centuries boasted of the Magna Carta, many centuries boasted of its reasonableness, of its moderate nature, and castigated all others around the globe for falling short of our standards. That's when I knew that we as a country are in serious trouble. That a 71-year-old, 7 times elected British Member of Parliament, a Member of Parliament until last year and across 5 different decades, the leader of a legal British political party with hundreds of thousands of votes, and the presenter of virtually the biggest political current affairs show in the Anglosphere, in the Western world, I could end up with 2 armed police officers in a sealed room in an airport in England for no reason at all. Well, there is a reason, but it is not the reason that they stated. We were questioned, myself for around 4 hours, Gayatri for around 5 hours, and then released without charge. For what charge could there possibly have been? How could we, me and Gayatri, have anything to do with terrorism? How? Well, we certainly were not enlightened during the collective 9 hours of questioning. Not a single effort was made to show cause for having detained me and her with armed officers in public in an English airport. Not a single question. And they ranged far and wide, right down to Gayatri's famous fingernail painted in the Palestinian colors. Why? Why is your fingernail painted in the Palestinian colors? What's your attitude to the conflict in Gaza?
It's unbelievable.
Who persuaded you of this point of view? Why do you admire Mr. Lavrov? Why are you so friendly to China, a country with which Britain maintains absolute and full diplomatic relations? And every big company in the United Kingdom is doing business with China. And we're not. They would dearly love to be. What does that have to do with terrorism? What do my views on Xi Jinping have to do with terrorism? What do my views on Lavrov have to do with terrorism? What does Gayatri's fingernail have to do with terrorism? Well, of course, you all know the answer is nothing at all. The reason why they detained us at the airport under the terrorism legislation, assuming that they already know that we are unintimidatable. If they don't know that, they're too stupid to be anti-terrorism police. They're too stupid to be in MI5. If they think they can intimidate me, not even death will intimidate me. So assuming they know that, there is only one reason why they detained us there under that legislation. It was to gain access to our communications.
Yeah, and Max Blumenthal said the same thing. They wanted to know who he was in contact with. I do think they thought they could intimidate you. Apparently they were wrong. As anybody who knows anything about George Galloway knows, he is a fighter, if ever there were one, and good for him. That was a very fiery monologue. You could watch the whole thing. It's about 20 minutes, but it's just insane. Like, what the hell is wrong with the UK? Why are your fingernails painted? Like, is that a serious question? Like, this is a place that prides itself on Western values of liberalism and human rights. You're asking a woman why her fingernails are painted in the Palestine? Maybe because they're being, like, starved and genocided, and I wanted to show some, like, human solidarity. Like, maybe, is that an idea that crossed your mind? You yourself, Keir Starmer, recognized a Palestinian state. Good for you. Good for you. Meanwhile, you just had to drop charges. They just threw out the charges against Kneecap, who were harassed for a year for now having done nothing wrong. They threw out the charges, so there was no you talk about people who should sue the fucking government. Kneecap had to cancel their U.S. tour because they were tied up in court on a bullshit charge. It was just thrown out.
I was going to cover it. We bought tickets.
Yeah, those tickets were hundreds of dollars a piece. They had the whole fucking tour sold out. Talk about a bunch of money that they cost themselves being tied up in court on a bullshit case. On a bullshit case. And I'm not saying, we couldn't say it was a bullshit case for a while on YouTube, but now I guess we can because courts ruled that it was a bullshit case. They threw it out.
We wouldn't cover it here because you don't know.
Yeah, nobody did. You don't know. They could
you're
say
supporting terrorism.
Right, that's a prescribed organization, and they support a prescribed. It's like just absolute fucking nonsense. This is the nonsense that the UK engages in. Like, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And don't get me wrong. Like, we do the same thing. Like, Max Blumenthal got detained on the way in here. I'm not saying they are unique.
Piker.
Yeah, I'm not saying like this is unique to them. But it is just really embarrassing to see these Western countries who supposedly stand up for liberal values of free expression. That's supposed to be what makes us better than the Arab world, right? Than the Eastern world and the Middle Eastern world, is because we stand up for free expression. Well, not if you are against Israel. Or, as he said, okay, we have full diplomatic relations as a country with China, so why are you interrogating me about my views on China? What the fuck is it your business? I'm a commentator. I'm an elected politician representing a legitimate party with hundreds of thousands of votes. I have a right to my opinion. Do I not? Like, who the fuck are you to do this? It's crazy. It's just insane to see the West expose itself like this time after time, but they don't stop. Even as they start conceding that they're losing the argument, the big picture argument, which is a lot of what this recognition of a Palestinian state was in their small way, right? An admission that they're losing the argument, or that they're pivoting because they had been losing the argument. But then they do shit like this, and you're like, you know what? Power is still power. And they're still willing to, exert every ounce of it that they can to intimidate people who they don't like. And that seems to be the case here, and it seems to be the case there.
I think what we're seeing right now throughout the Western world is the maxim, fascism is capitalism under pressure.
Right.
This is what you're seeing. One of my favorite memes was Superman looking off camera saying, "Who are you?" And off camera is Homelander saying, "I'm you under pressure." Exactly. Like, this is happening throughout the West as the West moral authority is crumbling. And it was always this way. It's just becoming more overt now. The limit of your freedom of speech was always the ability to affect meaningful change that actually upsets the economic and social order. Your freedom of speech always hit that line and could go no further. That's what we saw in what we were talking about top of show. Assata Shakur, Fred Hampton, the Black Panthers. That's what we saw. Once your speech is really a threat to power, they don't mind you talking, do-goody civics bullshit. But once you're really threatening who holds power, and the underlying structure of that power, you never had freedom of speech above that line. We had a period after they crushed that rebellion, that uprising, that awakening, however you want to see it, with the Reagan Revolution, where, they didn't mind if you were like kind of a bohemian and a rebel, right? They absorbed that back into the system.
Sure.
I saw mention this book that is long out of print, and of course he did. Chris Hedges, I've mentioned this book before, The Making of a Counterculture. Theodore Rosnick, I believe the name of the author was. He was a longtime columnist at the San Francisco Chronicle. Last I looked, remarkably, he was still alive. I'm not sure if he still is. But he wrote this really prophetic book saying that the problem with the new left and the counterculture was they were underestimating the ability of capitalism to absorb it and sell it back to itself. And that's exactly what happened. By the time you get into the 80s, they've taken the whole hippie thing, and that's how it was presented. Like, it's just drugs and kind of harmless and kind of silly and kind of stupid and kind of misguided. Meanwhile, you go back and you read contemporaneous writing from that period, and there's very serious thinking going on about how to undo capitalism, how to undo the money system, like very not just stupid kids, like very serious thinking about that. By the time you get into the 80s, they filtered that out, and they're presenting that period in hindsight as having just been a bunch of misguided kids on drugs, and that's still the way that it is portrayed. They spend very little time on the intellectual and theoretical ferment of that period because they crushed it. They crushed it and they drained it out of the narrative. We're facing a similar moment now where the West's moral legitimacy is in question and being entirely rejected by its youth, entirely rejected by the next generation. And we have seen what they do under that pressure, man. They will go out, they will use every means at their disposal, intelligence services, control over the media to crush those movements. You don't have any more of a crackdown now than you did in the 60s and 70s. We just haven't seen this for a very long time because they haven't been scared like this for a very long time.
Well, yeah, you had a very, very narrow sort of Overton window for, from the Reagan Revolution, really through Occupy Wall Street, which was the beginning of
yes,
the sort of
exactly.
crack-in.
That's when they start getting scared again.
Yeah, exactly.
Please clap.